Live Instagram. All right, cool. We are good to go. AFK discussions starts now.
Yo,
What's going on? What's going on?
we're live, dude. What's up?
That's right. Pretty exciting. First time we're this is the first time you've ever been live, right? During an episode
Yeah.
like this?
Well, I was live on the confessionals a while back with Tony and Jack, but yeah, first time we've been live though, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Yeah, so I'm excited. We have a very special guest tonight. Joel Thomas is going to be joining us. Um, Made famous by Merkle Media and various documentaries. Obviously, his music, obviously, his Nephilim talk, research,
Portal
um,
babies.
portal babies, sax. I'm not going to tell you what kind of sax. You can get into that. But yeah, he's in, he's, I want to say world renowned, famous, I would say at this point. So we're going to have him on in a couple moments to talk about the brand new documentary coming out that he is a part of or was a part of. So yeah, we're very excited. Jason, before we get in and introduce him, why don't you tell us about the lovely sponsors for today's episode?
Yo, guys. So tonight, check out fattack.com. They got everything you need. If you're a big dude, if you are a Giga Chad with muscles on top of muscles and you cannot fit into body armor because you're so jacked, then go to Fat Tack because they got big size armor for you. They got plate carriers, they got belts, holsters, pretty much anything you need there. But yeah, check it out, fattack.com. And also you can get AFK Discussions t-shirts there. So fattack.com for all your needs. That's pretty much it, man. That's our sponsor.
Yeah, hell yeah, hell yeah. And of course, you guys can follow us at AFK Discussions on Instagram. It's AFK Discussion Podcast. Everywhere else, I think it's AFK Discussions. So make sure you guys also leave a 5-star rating. But enough about all that stuff. We have an amazing guest here, so let's introduce him. We got Joel Thomas. Let's bring him up. What up, Joel? I'm going to give you the main stage here. There he is. What's up, Joel? How are you, bud?
What's up, guys?
What's up?
Not much, man. Thank you for joining us. We had the pleasure of having an early release of this incredible documentary, The Sasquatch and the Missing Man, or Missing Person, Missing Man. We believe it's a man. I think it's a man. I don't know. Is it a man? We don't know. I don't want to assume. You know what I mean? Nowadays, good God forbid. But no, it's an incredible documentary. I'm making jokes in the beginning, but it was an incredible documentary. You guys continue to outdo yourselves with every single documentary you guys put out. So as a person that's kind of on the outside, but I also know you guys, so I kind of hear things that are happening, and so it's just awesome to have you on to talk about this. So thank you for joining us. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. And I was happy to send you guys an early release. That was something we were doing for several podcasts before, just so we could get everybody hyped for it and talk about it a little bit and get people, ready for it. Because it was a incredible time that we had when we were out in Washington, and just meeting Wes and getting in his space, his hidden world that nobody really gets a part of. That's pretty cool. Because, Wes has never been a part of anything like this, and he's been invited a whole lot over the years. And Wes doesn't do anything but a show. That's pretty much it. And every now and then he might show up at some live event, but generally speaking, if he does, he's just showing up as everybody else. He's not showing up as somebody that's, Wes Germer. But he and Tony are really tight, and he told Tony that he'd do this, take us up there. It was a lot of fun. It was interesting seeing him back in the area because he hasn't been back there, at least in that spot. Like, he's definitely been to the national park, but he hasn't been back to that spot in a long time. And getting him back up there And you can even tell in the film he's pretty nervous, and he definitely wouldn't go out there with us at night. He said we were pretty crazy for doing that. That was back at his house. He said, "Man, y'all are crazy." He's like, "I'll be honest with you." But we hear that every trip we go on from people who are eyewitnesses to certain areas. They think we're nuts. So it's, it is what it is. I mean, some people are built for it, and some people like to do it, and I'm one of them. So I like to have a blast. And generally, I'm the one they sent out by myself. So I enjoy that. I like going out by myself. I feel like I like to give these things an advantage, or at least a perceived advantage, because I feel like they're going to try to do something more if I'm by myself in these situations, which they tend to do. And they did on this trip as well. And some of that I can talk about because it's not on the film. So I can talk about some of that weird stuff that happened.
Yeah, and that's actually one thing I did want to mention too, because I obviously, I film a majority of my things I do by myself too.
Right.
So I think there is something to the fact of being out there, either in a small group or by yourself. I think by yourself is even more so. You're just kind of like out there in the open, so like you're definitely a bigger target, and I think you're right. Things are more willing to definitely interact with you if you're on your own, more so than if you're in a huge group and that sort of thing. So I think that's definitely a kudos to you for going out there, for sure. As a person that does go out there by themselves, it does take a lot of courage to do that, and especially when you hear the stories, like, you know what I mean? It's like one thing, it's like, it's like, oh, this place is haunted. Oh, okay, cool. But like, you hear the story about like, the things that are happening in this area, and it's like, there's a little bit more going on here than, than just, voices in the night, we'll just say. So yeah, when you're going in, just Wes' story alone, going somewhere in that area by yourself alone I mean, that's crazy. So kudos to you. And yeah, we would love, I know I'm going to speak for Jason here, but I think we would love to hear about what happened when you were on your own.
Yeah, real quick though, man. I was watching it with my family last night. We were watching the film together, and my son was like, "Is he crazy?" I was like, "Who, Joel?" I was like, "Maybe." I don't know. He's brave at least. I don't know.
Is that the first
crazy
question of the night, Jason?
Yeah.
Are you crazy?
It's funny because when you go and watch the film afterwards, you forget about a lot of stuff you say in the moment and what's happening. Because, we don't play anything up to the camera. We're just, who we are, and, it is what it is. So, and when it was cut and edited, it was ready to go. And I watched it when it was finished. There's a moment where it flashed to me, and I'm like, I'll go out there by my damn self. So It's funny. Every trip, there's this moment where I say something like really crazy, and everybody always laughs afterwards because they're like, "Yeah, there's Joel. That's typical." But I didn't even think about it in the moment. I was just jacked to get out there, and yeah, it just kind of happens. But I'd forgotten about that until I watched the film. I was like, "Oh, I forgot I said that."
No, I think it was one of your better moments for sure of the documentary, no doubt.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what we would love to hear what happened when you were on your own.
Yeah, for sure. So there was that moment where it was time for me to go out there, and it's pouring down rain too. So I had an umbrella to try to keep some of the equipment dry, because I was going up there with a camera. And this is when everything was getting kind of crazy, because a lot of stuff, and I won't tell everybody everything that happened, but there was a lot of noises and things happening outside of the RV when we were in it. So we knew that something was going on out there. Another piece of footage that didn't make the film was there was infrared that was going on that we were using to look into the tree lines when this stuff was going on. And it looks like there was a pretty large head that looked out from a tree line at us. You could see the eyes. Now, again, it wasn't something we could just nail down and say this is what it is. So generally speaking, if it's, it'd have to be really blatant, at least, pretty obvious. So it was one of those moments that was weird. And then I decided to go out by myself. So as I'm leaving, and going up to where Wes had his experience, something followed me up there. I mean, something thumped parallel to me, probably about 20 feet, 30 feet to the left of me. And anytime I would stop, it would stop. And as soon as I would get going again, it would be like thud, 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 almost in sync with me. But it was large, large footsteps. So something broke away from the rest, whatever that is, and followed me up there. Definitely thought that, well, I'm alone. So it was one of those moments. And I went up there around where Wes was at, came back. It followed me back some of the way and then stopped when it noticed I was getting closer to the RV. So that was pretty crazy in and of itself. But that's not the first or the last time that's happened to me when I've broken off from the group where something was happening. I decided to go up on myself and something breaks off, whether it's with a group or it was singular, broke off and went with me to wherever I decided to go. So, and generally it's in the woods, it's in some sort of tree line. So if I'm on a path, it's definitely staying in the tree line and it's moving fairly quickly, but it's almost like it wants me to know it's there and it's not being stealthy. So it's definitely making noise, but it's also stopping every time I stop. So I don't, continue to hear in depth what it's doing, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be unnerving for sure. Now, at maximum, how far away did you go from the group?
Well, where the RV was at, it was at the bottom of this fork. So you go up the fork, you go over like 2 hills, and it pretty quickly you're out of sight of the RV. So I was out of sight of anybody. I was alone at that point.
Yeah.
So I mean, if something had wanted to do something, probably could have. So I mean, there's that possibility too. So I don't know. Generally speaking, I'm armed in these situations. Not to say that I'm going to be able to shoot something that's, moving out of, at a quantum level. I don't know.
Yeah.
So depends on what it is. Right. So, I mean, even, if it was Bigfoot, man, if it's manifesting in some weird way, I don't know if I'm going to be able to take that out or not. Sometimes I question bringing firearms because of the fact that I feel like they know the firearms are there. And we do have, I've backed off carrying a lot of the big stuff from early on to now, just because if I have something that's concealed, I feel like it's a little bit, at least on the outside, I look more vulnerable than if I'm, conceal carrying as opposed to not. So that's just something that we've been doing, but sometimes we, carry heavy stuff too. It just depends on the situation. Depends on where we're at too. Cause if I'm going deep into like some national park or something, and, I might want to be holding an AR or something, honestly, it's just up to how we're feeling. I like to lately though, do a lot more conceal. More than anything. I know the next film that we have coming out, which will be early next year, that we've already been on, they did, and nobody knows this yet, but they did send me out into the Smokies by myself, like miles deep into the Smokies, to the point where the radio contact was gone. Like they were talking and then it just disappeared. So I actually had Scott Carpenter's personal gimbal with the camera that swivels behind you that he caught a lot of cryptids on when he used to go out there. That was his best way of catching them, because he would have the gimbal would move and refocus while he was walking, because they'll pop out behind you. So that footage hasn't even been looked at yet. And that was probably a good 2.5 hours. I was out there by myself walking around, often and I tend to, if I'm doing something, I'm going to do it right. So I'm going to go off into some very off beaten paths and stay off the main path. So I did go into some pretty strange spots. So definitely some spots where there wasn't any noise being made, which typically means there's something there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I try to give whatever it was an advantage. So if maybe we caught something behind me, that would be kind of cool too. But it just depends on if it's night. Now I know sometimes I've gone out at night and I'll have something night vision that's pointing behind me. We've been doing that lately too. So I think that's, definitely one of the things I like to do now.
I love
So
it.
I-
I love it.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. So I know it's nothing like this happened in the film, but maybe off camera or something that didn't make it to film. Did you guys happen to hear any of that metallic sound that they say that happens when like portals open or anything? Did off, because I think that I think that may have been talked about after you guys had filmed this, that information came out. But yeah.
Not any metallic sounds, but the craziest thing that happened was with Tony and I. So I had come back from being by myself and we were moving things back into the RV. I think Ward was going to do some shots of us walking the RV, and then we were going to talk about things that happened out there. Tony and I were in the back of the RV by ourselves. Everybody else had gone in. And the best way I can describe it is Tony and I felt a growl, not heard it, but felt it. It was like what you would consider infrasound. So something growled so guttural and deep that it vibrated us while we were out back of this RV. So Tony looked at me and said, "Did you hear that?" And I was like, "Nah, man, I felt that," because it vibrated like the very core of me, but it was loud, but it vibrated us. And it's typical of what you hear of Sasquatch being able to speak using like infrasound, being able to vibrate people. They're speaking at a different frequency. So that was very weird. I've never had anything like that happen in my life. So that was probably one of the weirdest things that didn't make the film. There was no cameras out there at the time. Tony laughs. He's like, "Man, stuff always happens when the camera's not on or whatever." And I know people think it's a cop out, but honestly, I just believe that these cryptids are that smart too. I think they understand technology, especially if they're using quantum physics or they're moving in and out of time and space. It's a little different. It doesn't listen. I think Bigfoot's been around a long time. Do you not think that they've gotten smart over time and watch technology? So I think the people that can't wrap their minds around that are people that think that Bigfoot is just some missing link, just flesh and blood, and they can't wrap their minds around this quantum realm, which, by the way, organizations like CERN talk about openly. There being parallel universes and everything that goes along with it. So this isn't something that science, at least mainstream science, doesn't talk about. They do talk about it. So to think that there aren't things that can move in and out quickly, I mean, I think that's one of the ways that Bigfoot can disappear. That, along with, I've definitely taken on board this spider crawl situation, which you're hearing more and more about. There was a person here in Ohio recently that had one do the same thing. I do think that's a quick way they can drop out of the line of sight. I think when you see one and then it disappears, they just drop down in the spider crawl. And think about it, when they drop down the spider crawl, what people have witnessed, they're moving around on their toes and their fingers. So that's an easy way to lose footsteps, to not have footsteps where people can follow you too. So I just think maybe it's a mechanism that maybe all versions of Bigfoot are able to do. Maybe we just don't know a lot about it because of only a few people had seen it, but now more people are more open about talking about this weird thing that they do.
Yeah, that is definitely weird, which I had heard about in the past, but I mean, the way the lady describes it, I don't want to go into the way she describes it just in case. But I was like, wow, that's I never thought about it that way. That's
well,
very
she
weird.
won't even say that it is a Sasquatch. Like she won't use those words because she can't wrap her mind around what she saw. But we just attribute it to a Bigfoot because of the way that it moved and the way that the one moved when it was with Wes. But let's not forget, when Wes had his experience, he saw 3 of them. So one of them was what he would consider a juvenile. And when it was in the tree, it was glitching. So it was glitching around, like almost like it was moving in and out of some parallel dimension.
Mhm.
So it was real glitchy, and maybe, you know, juveniles are learning how to do it. They don't know yet. They don't have that full on ability mastered yet, like Bigfoot, like grown Bigfoot would have. So
Yeah.
that's just my opinion. That's just a theory I threw out there. I was like, maybe because of the heightened situation, the juvenile was freaking out, probably excited. You know, dad standing there like bluff charging this truck. He's probably seen dad rip people apart. And I don't even think that all Bigfoot are super aggressive. You know, I know all the missing 411 stuff, and I'm not saying that there aren't Bigfoot involved with it, but I do think there are different versions of Bigfoot. And I think you might have what I allude to, like meat sack Bigfoot that are created by the government that host entities to guard spaces. Those would probably be aggressive at all times because I don't think they're what we would consider a Sasquatch, at least the creature Sasquatch. And you might have tribes of Sasquatch that are a little more aggressive, like they talk about the red-haired ones. But I do typically think that ones that are aggressive, you're in their space, you're in their environment, and maybe they're just being territorial, you know, especially like a male Bigfoot. You're in his space, there's his wife, and there's his small kid glitching out. He's probably freaking out.
Yeah. Man, you brought up the meat sack. I told you earlier, I was like, I totally want to get into that, but that we can wait for a minute.
Yeah.
Something that kind of it's off, definitely off the film, way off the film. So I did help do the recreation of the Wes's story. So when we were filming after that, you know, we encountered something kind of strange. What Tony likes to call the predator sound.
Yeah.
Which that still, man, it still freaks me out. I still think about it all the time. And I know when we went back in the woods, you kind of were off ahead of us. Did you hear anything? Because I didn't really talk to you afterward. Did you hear anything weird or anything when you were out there up and ahead of us?
Not when I was
Not
out
really?
there. And I heard the sound. Tony and I butt heads about that.
Yeah.
I think it's a frog. That's just
You think it's a
me.
frog?
But that's because I generally feel something weird when something is weird, and I just didn't feel anything at that point. I'm not saying it wasn't.
Yeah.
He did interview Justin from Cryptids of the Corn, and Justin said that it could be a shoebill, which are like mini dinosaurs because they make a very similar sound. He said there are shoebill that are traded on the black market as exotic pets, and sometimes people can't take care of them, they let them go, and that's how they end up in these weird places in like Tennessee or whatever. He said it might have been a juvenile. It wasn't no damn shoebill. That's what I told Justin. I was
Yeah.
like, man, nah, I killed him too. I hit him up right after that. I'm like, man, I wish it was a shoebill because I love shoebill. They're like my second favorite animal, so I love shoebill a lot. But I don't know. I know you guys definitely heard and felt something different than me. I don't know. I'm not going to say it's not because I'll never be that person. I just know for me personally, I'm not even saying it's a frog, but when Tony and I and Jack went out there again, the last time I was in town, there was a lot of those sounds, and we did run up on a lot of frogs. So there were a bunch of frogs that were out, and it just rained. But Tony swears up and down it was something different than that, which it could. What if it was something predator-like that was mimicking the frogs in the area and couldn't quite get that sound? But that's very typical of Bigfoot behavior anyway, because they mimic a lot of sounds. You'll hear Bigfoot mimic owls a lot, where you'll think it's an owl, but it just doesn't sound quite right. Yeah, it's probably a Bigfoot. They like to mimic a lot of animal sounds in the forest. They'll even mimic people. People have talked about that, where Bigfoot sounded like a person. And you know, at that point, then you're also getting into Fae territory and talking about fairies and what they might be doing. Because you talk about Fae folk, I mean, they definitely can shapeshift into things as well. And I think maybe some of these Bigfoot sightings aren't Bigfoot at all. They're Fae, and they're just taking the form of a Bigfoot and trying to lure people into the woods, which I've personally had happen. So, and Tony too. So we know that we've definitely dealt with some Fae on some of our trips. So I think that's also a possibility. That's why I don't really try to pinpoint exactly what Bigfoot is, because everybody's experience is different. And you can't say this experience isn't true just because it happened differently for this person. It's like the people that see Bigfoot walk off a cliff, but like walk down and they're still walking, but they're walking at a, 90-degree angle, something weird, and it doesn't make sense to you. Well, I don't know, but it doesn't make it any less true. And I think that's where we get real divisive in the community about what something is, because you got the guys that are just flesh and blood, and they get super angry at anybody that questions anything outside of that. But it's like, you weren't there, man. You don't know. So you can't say that that person who's not on drugs, not drunk, anything, happened to see something. Maybe their mind's playing tricks on them, but not every single person. And there's been too many cases, way too many cases that have come out over the years, decades even, of just weird things that don't make sense. Orbs following Bigfoot and grays, just why are all these things hanging around each other? You guys are asking those questions.
Yeah, man, totally. So I want to go back real quick and just tell you what I heard, because so Josh and I, when we were in the truck, we heard the frogs. And the first time Tony came over to us, was like, I heard something weird like the Predator. And so Josh and I were like, it's just frogs. We heard the frogs out there. But whenever after we were done filming, we were standing around the trucks, what I heard there was completely different than frogs. It sounded like it was up in the trees, like coming from deep in the forest, but really loud. And I was like, that's no frog. It's so loud, So that's just my take on it. That's what I heard.
I'm open to it. I just don't think that I was privy to what you guys were exactly hearing, but I was with you. So I heard when you were hearing stuff. I just don't know if I could place it like that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because I didn't feel weird with it. So my mind was already, and maybe that's what it was doing. It was tricking me too. So I don't say that it's not. I just like to push back on Tony a little bit on that one, just because it's just one of those few times. But there's been times where I've been like, man, this is it. And Tony's like, man, that ain't it. I didn't feel nothing either. So it doesn't mean that it's not, or you guys didn't have an experience just because I didn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
To me, I can't pinpoint it down enough to say that was so clear and evident that it was different than any other sound that was happening at night. To me, I couldn't do it, but I'm no frog expert either, man.
Yeah. So. Yeah. It sounded, if it was anything, I would say it would be like a woodpecker or something rather than a frog. What I heard.
Maybe, but
it was night, so a woodpecker shouldn't be out,
Right. I don't know, man. I mean, I've had a ton of weird stuff happen in those woods. So tons. And a lot of that, it will be seen on the next film that we put out. And we had the craziest stuff in the world happen on that trip. But I don't know, man. It could have been. Maybe it was just meant for you guys to hear, not me. Maybe, I don't know.
You can ask Phil, though. We recorded, I think, the night after, and I was like freaking out still.
Yeah, that's true. He's been talking about this for months, and he's been like, I'm telling you. It's didn't we? I don't know. You played something for me on the show. I can't remember what it was. It wasn't. I don't think it wasn't that, but it was something else.
I played the shoe bill sound.
Yeah, you did, right?
Yeah, but that sounds totally different. It sounds more like a machine gun. The shoe bill.
Well, it's the juvenile though. If you play the juvenile, because that's the one Tony's like, no, it sounds a lot like that. So that's the closest thing that they've been able to find. But Tony says it's still not what he heard, but it's the closest.
Okay.
So I don't know. Look, man, a lot of weird stuff's happened in that woods. It could have been It could have definitely been something weird for all I know. I mean, I've definitely seen some wild stuff in those woods.
Yeah, man. I mean, I've heard the stories. So
And I can't wait to hear them. I do want to say that Colleen says that she likes your attitude about that, Joel. I'm not sure what exactly she was referring to. It's probably from a few minutes ago, but hey. Also, Joel, if you want, I got a question from the fans here. Do you
Yeah.
believe in aliens? I know it's a complicated
That's a good
question.
question.
Maybe meat sacks might be
Man,
involved.
I give it the possibility. I don't know everything God's created, so I'm not going to say that it's not definitively. I will say this: the caveat is, why do every single one of them look like us? You would think in this vast universe that they would somehow look different. And every now and then you hear about an alien race that does, and I'm like, that's probably real. That might be a real one. There's a literal alien race that looks like they're crab people. And they look like giant crabs. They come off of ships and they just mine stuff and take away. They're not taking people. They're not doing anything to people. They're literally just getting some resources and bouncing out. I find that more realistic. Giant crab people aliens than Greys. And I just do because the Greys and all their spawns off, all the spawn offs, the Nordics, the Pleiadians. We can go down the list. There's like 9 different ones. You could even rope in the Draconians, whatever. They're all are like bipedal. They look like humans in some way. Got noses, eyes, and they all say the same thing. We're the evolution of you in the future, or we're the advancement of you. We're the next level of what you're going to get to. Let me help you get there, to this tap into this spiritual existence. Let me show you the way. And it's always negative. It never ends well. It's always ends in some butt play. It never ends well, guys. Like, this is, the Greys are the worst of the worst. Anybody that tells me that the Greys are good, I need to talk to you, because I can tell you right now that they probably blocked out half the stuff they've done to you. There's no way. The Greys are the worst. They're absolutely
probably
the worst.
Gray.
Nobody I've ever heard has had like an ending with Greys being good. That's just a fact. So are you asking me, is there a possibility of alien life? Absolutely. I'm not one of those guys that says they're all demons and they're all this and that. There's no way, man. I don't know what everything's God's created. There's absolutely no way for me to say that. I just find these specific ones to be probably not. They're probably some negative entity, some negative thing. I'm just being honest with you. The Greys, yes. Pleiadians, absolutely. The Nordics, they look like us. They're just like taller with like blonde hair. And it's like, yeah, you're a freaking Nephilim, man. I know what you are. Like, come on. Like, you'll find people that are deep into the New Age philosophy that find these aliens to be some form of enlightenment, because they tap into this crown chakra or their pineal gland, the third eye, and they tap in with these entities. These entities show them how to evolve their minds. It never ends well. I don't care what any of them say. It never does. They generally have a lot of issues that surround all of that. I mean, you talk about CE5, you got that going on. I mean, man, these guys are out there doing rituals and basically chanting to bring these entities in. Come on in. That's what they're doing. They're going out in the desert or going out in these places to lure these entities in. That's why these UFOs come and dance in front of them or on camera, which I've seen plenty of the Greer stuff where there's pictures of Greys and all this stuff. I mean, it's all real, but it's not aliens like you think. It's interdimensional. That's what I think. And I think that these entities are real in some format. I just don't think they're what they're telling you they are. It just is there's too much negativity surrounding it. And my biggest thing with generally when you hear these stories, they're always leading you away from God. Generally, they always have these conversations. And I've heard so many countless stories about how they'll bring up the fact that Jesus didn't exist. If he didn't exist, why are you talking about it? Why is it a thing? If you're so evolved and you're at this next level of the next level, that shouldn't even be a conversation piece. That's a piece of history that's not true. Why are you bringing it up?
Yeah.
Nobody can answer that question to me. Well, they can, but it doesn't make any sense, the gibberish that they're saying. So that's where I'm at with it. It's a loaded question. Do I think there could be aliens? Absolutely. I just don't think the ones that are in our face all the time are really aliens from another planet. I just don't think they are. I think they've already been here. I think they're what people would consider, or the Gnostics would talk about, the archons and just demonic entities, fallen entities, however you want to word it. So many different versions of what that could be too. I don't think every gray is the same. It's just like Bigfoot. I think some of them could be entities, outright etheric. I think some of them have a flesh and blood type of thing to them as well. There's so many different possibilities, but that was a long way to get around the question, Phil, of yes, I think there could be, but I don't think a lot of them are.
I think it was well explained. I think it was a great answer. So no, I think it was awesome. So yeah, I appreciate that, Leo, for that question. That's awesome. Man, so much to get into. I will say about the documentary. How does this documentary stack up to the other documentaries you've done? I'm sure by this point you've done a few now, so like every documentary probably has its own feel. Just kind of how's this documentary been compared to the other ones? Just in your opinion.
I think we're learning the formula more and more as we go, like how we want to do it, and every film gets better. Production-wise, it gets better, and the way that we do it is getting better and better. I mean, you'll see a huge jump from this film even to the next one that we did when we were traveling all through Kentucky and Tennessee. So you're going to see a massive you'll see every time we do a film, it goes up because we're learning how we want to produce these. And we do keep that authentic element when we're out there alive. So that's part of what we want to do. We don't want to make this like a film where it's scripted. There is a loose script to things as far as we want to do these interviews at this time of the day. We want to do this, but it's always subject to change too, depending on what's happening. Because if something crazy is happening, all that gets thrown on the wayside because that's what we're chasing. So it just depends on the environment we're in, what's going on. But typically we will have things lined up like interviews. So we know we're going to this person's house, or we're going to see this person. This person's coming to see us at X amount of time. We're going to get these interviews because this person's had an experience, or they can take us to a place where some weird stuff's happened. There was a lot of stuff left on the table from The Shape of Shadows. When we talked to Johnny, who's lived there forever, all the stories he told us about water babies and all of these half deer, half human people that were out in these mesas he was taking us to, all these different things, all this lore that goes on in the area. Well, that stuff could make the film because we're there for one purpose. But when we're there, we experience so much, everywhere we go. We end up seeing a lot more than the film can contain. You're just getting like the major highlights of our trip and the major big things that happen. But I would say every trip's gotten better, and I think it's only going to go up. I was just talking to Ward earlier today. We've got several projects that we're looking to put out within the next year or so. Even outside of some of the main films, we've got other documentaries. I've got one specifically I'm not telling anybody about yet, but I'm working on with Ward, and I'm going to be hitting a bunch of different states, and it's going to be a wild one. So we're working on that. Ward's got one he's working on. Tony's got some more ideas that he's bringing to the table. We've all got a bunch of stuff that we're working on, and we're definitely going to bring to the forefront. But to answer your question, Phil, the difference would be we're just getting more and more comfortable. We're also getting more comfortable in each of our roles and like what we do when we're out there. Tony and I have got a new thing that we do on these trips. Then that started on this last trip that we did. I go off alone a lot, but one thing we want to start doing at least once in each location is Tony and I both to go off alone. And that's one thing. And honestly, it really paid off this last one, because that's when the craziest stuff happened, is when Tony and I were alone in the woods together. So, stuff happens. We just try to shake it up, but we've got a little bit more of a formula now. Everybody feels real comfortable with what they do. And, we got a new camera guy that is phenomenal. Joe, he's been great. So he works really well with Ward. So we've got a really nice format. But I would say from production wise, Phil, it's only gotten better. And you'll see that on this film too.
Yeah, I love that. I always like that kind of stuff, like the behind the scenes kind of aspects of, how people work together in documentaries and film stuff, being a person that also makes like videos and stuff. I always find it interesting, the process and, how that changes and evolves, I'm sure, as you go along. And like you said, I think when you start doing it more and more, I think it becomes easier because everyone kind of knows their role. Everyone knows what's expected of them, and that kind of stuff is kind of made easier. And then as you go along in your documentaries, and already know all that stuff, and so your guys are comfortable with one another and stuff, and it just makes it for an easier record and easier all around. You know what I mean? Because you're all right then and there. So where do we want to go from here? Should we go into Nephilim, or do you want to talk about the documentary? Maybe one more question about the documentary, just to maybe plug that a little bit more. Jason, do you have any questions about the documentary specific?
I have questions, but that's some I don't want to ruin the documentary, so I can't ask it.
I will say this for anybody that's listening. We do have a very interesting piece that we caught on a camera, and we do have a biologist come and break it down on the film, and it's still left up for debate what it was, because it was a weird time of year, and even his biological explanation, what it could be, is still odd for that time of year when it happened. And I'm glad we've got a guy like Justin who's, on the team-ish. We always joke because, he and I both live in Ohio, and I hang out with Justin a lot. He's a cool dude. And it's nice having a legit biologist you can go to with some of this stuff, this footage, and you can always rule out anything in the animal kingdom or bug life or bird life, whatever. You can go to him and say, what do you think? And he'll know from the topography and the area that it's in. He can say, you know what? I can rule this out. And the good thing about Justin is he's also a believer in all the weird. So he definitely believes in the fae folk and Bigfoot, and he's had his own experiences with Bigfoot. So he knows Bigfoot exists and Dogman and all the stuff and parallel dimensions, everything else. So, but he also has that schooling, that basis of biology to understand that, hey, you know what? Here's what is a possibility in that area. Or he can just rule it out immediately and say, there's nothing in that area that it could possibly be. It's like that thing that happened to you, Jason, where he said shoe bill. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't even give it a possibility anything out of a shoe bill. So he's definitely saying even a shoe bill is super weird. I told Tony, I said, I hope it's a shoe bill. Freaking love those things, man. They're like mini dinosaurs. I'd love to ride up on one of those things. They're as tall as me, like over 6 foot tall. Those things are huge. So yeah, that'd be weird in itself, running across like a baby dinosaur in the woods. So yeah, I'm down, man, for whatever. But it is nice having Justin when we do see some weird things happen and being able to. And there is a very weird instance that happens on this film that happened when everything else was happening. It might not be as weird, or it might have been able to be dismissed away as something biological, but with everything else that happened, then it made that even more impactful to where you're like, you know what? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I love it.
That's, I was thinking about that. So
I love it. One thing I want to.
I figured I could dance around it.
Yeah.
one of the things I want to applaud you guys for in this documentary is your guys' ability to switch gears without giving anything away. You know, you go into the Pacific Northwest with Wes Germer's story, and you know you start, and that's your starting point. And then at the end of this documentary, you're essentially an entirely different ending point. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, I don't give anything away, but I think it's interesting that you guys just kind of followed the evidence or kind of followed the trails that were hot, and if things went cold, then you went in a different direction, or you just kind of just you know just like I said, kind of followed the evidence is what I'm trying to say. So I want to applaud you guys for that because it was it's definitely like a roller coaster of a ride as far as documentary because it really does go from many different different directions very quickly.
Definitely. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, the production value is awesome on this film. I mean, like you said, it does step up each time, and this is by far the best. I loved it, man. It's great. Yeah.
And I say this happens on most of the all the trips that we've been on, where we go in with a set group of ideas, but we know to be flexible because you don't know what's going to happen. And with this particular story, it did lend to a lot of flexibility because of a big thread that happened on the trip that we weren't planned on, you know. And just to let anybody know, the name of this movie is Sasquatch and the Missing Man. So there is a missing man element to this story. So it does play into Missing 411 and some of these other aspects that are attributed to Bigfoot. So it's very interesting. And for us, it was very weird being there when it happened. So you don't really know how to react. You know, we were just on Pop Culture Crisis. Tony and I went to DC, and we were up there talking to them, and Mary asked us, she said, I just got to know, okay, so why did it take you so long to report the missing man, which I can talk about a little bit. And I had explained that in the film, you're seeing it as a whole. Like, we just know this is a missing man, but you got to understand, we weren't there in that area the whole time. We were all over Washington. So we were there one time with Wes, went back out there at night. Then we didn't return until about 4 days later. So that last night we were back out there. So we weren't out there multiple nights like that. It just so happened that we bookended the trip like that. And by the time we got out there again, we're like, okay, this thing's still here. We need to report something. We did. So I think at that point, you know, and you don't know. The other thing I was trying to explain to her as well was guys go up there to live off the grid all the time, and they'll work trades, which this guy worked a trade, and they'll just go up there. You see a campsite, you see a lot of other things with it, and you think, okay, maybe the guy just went to work, or maybe the guy walked off. You don't know. You can't pinpoint it. But I think after X amount of days and we knew something wasn't right, we need to at least report it, even if the guy was still around. You know, you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I thought it was definitely the most interesting thing about the documentary is just like the twists and turns it kind of takes along the way, which is I think kind of the first time one of these documentaries have really done that, whereas the other ones were kind of like very like, pretty much laser focused on what it is, and that's pretty much what it is. So I think it's definitely makes it interesting and different because you don't really know what to expect. There's the teaser there of the missing man aspect, but there's a lot that could go into that. You know what I mean? So before we get too far off the documentary, I did want to share one of these comments here. Colleen said, originally from Oregon and now in North Idaho, wondering if Joel thought of the amazing Pacific Northwest. I'm sure
it wasn't
Joel...
that amazing when I was there.
Oh, it was wintertime, right? Was that what the time was?
Yeah. It was raining, wet. It was snowing the first day we got there, so it was pretty awful. So it wasn't like it was fantastic. So that's what I thought about it. That's exactly what I thought about it. It wasn't great. Now, I'm not saying it's not a great place. We had a great time, but as far as the weather and everything, it was just a rough time of year to go too. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Nice. And I think we just have one more question in here, if you don't mind, Joel. You kind of already answered this, but I just wanted to throw it up there. Do you think all aliens are demonic? I think you already kind of answered that, but
Yeah, the re-answer it now. I don't think they're all demonic. I think that would be very egotistical of us as human beings. It's just like when people are like, Bigfoot, they're all Nephilim. They all come from a Nephilim bloodline. It's like, come on. Like, there's so many other possibilities. You can't pigeonhole into one thing. And I'll say this, and this is coming from a Christian. Christians are the worst at deeming anything they don't understand as demonic. They're the worst at doing it. If it's not what they think's holy, that it's demonic. And what I want to talk about is there are things in this unseen realm, this other dimension, many dimensions that God has created that we don't know about. You know, we can talk about Psalm 82:1, and I know Tony likes to bring that verse up a lot. I do as well. It's a very popular verse by Michael Heiser. He breaks down Elohim judged the Elohim. God judged the gods, the divine council. We know there's more than one God. Whoa, Christians start freaking out then, but there are other gods in these dimensions. And he apparently in this moment judged them for not doing something correctly. What does that mean? We don't know. We know that he's the Most High and we don't worship any other gods. We know that much, but there's a specific reason throughout Scripture where it's telling us not to worship other gods or false gods. It's not saying, like, you know, Christians will say that's metaphorical. They're talking about like worshiping your body or worshiping, you know, sports or whatever else, which also is true, but there is this element. There are false gods. There are real other gods, and some of them have probably tried or have been worshipped over the vast amount of years that the earth's been around. So no, I don't think everything's demonic, because if we're talking about other dimensions, there are probably creatures in these other dimensions that I would not consider to be good or bad. It'd be like a tiger, right? A tiger is not inherently good or bad. Will it rip your head off? Yes, it will. It's a dangerous creature. So if you were to run up on some sort of dangerous creature from another realm, what if it was scared or whatever else? It might hurt you. It might not be good or bad, but just because it's what you consider paranormal or something you can't understand doesn't inherently make it bad. It's like Mothman. You know, I think Mothman is like the trash panda of another dimension. They're always showing up. They're trying to eat some sort of like radioactive stuff. It's probably what they eat in some other dimension. You know, they tend to show up when something bad's going to happen. I don't even think Mothman is like something demonic. I just think Mothman gets trapped over here. And generally speaking, you've never heard of Mothman attacking anyone in any story. They generally look super scared, and they show up at some weird time when, you know, there's some crisis happening on Earth, which I'm thinking at that moment, there's some sort of dimensional rift and they get caught in here and they're freaking out. You know, most of the time they look super scared, but we're scared of them because we don't know what they are. And I think it's very similar to that. No, I don't think all aliens are demonic, because that would be very irresponsible of me to say that as a human being and be like, well, they're all demonic. But back to what I said before, if we're talking about these ones that typically look like us and they have all this knowledge they want to give us, they say they are the gods. We're, you know, the Anunnaki, we were the Egyptian gods, Horus. You can go down the pantheon of, you know, Greek mythology, all of it. You know, when you start hearing that, then yeah, I got some red flags coming up then, because why are you making it such an effort to talk about religious aspects of the world and say that you are the ones that started it all? It just doesn't add up. Now, that part doesn't add up. That's when I start going down this fallen angel demonic route with these aliens. But I wouldn't say all of them. And like I said before, like the crab people coming down just getting some fuel. Like, I don't, they might be real.
Yeah, probably the most likely candidate to be real.
You know what? When you were saying that, I had never really put two and two together or even thought about it. The Greek pantheon and how, there's demigods. Demigods are pretty much Nephilim, half human, half,
Yeah.
so,
Yep.
Absolutely. You talk about the
Yeah.
Titans.
yeah.
All
Titans, Hercules would be a Nephilim, half human, half god. It's,
And you could argue that Hercules was a redeemed Nephilim too, because he did have a redemptive tale that followed his journey. So it's very interesting. You'll see that throughout, and even in the Bible, Nephilim that seem to turn from their ways and do the right thing. So, I mean, again, I'm open to all possibilities. Nothing's off the table with me. I can look at the Bible and know that it's the truth, but also understand that I don't understand all of it, and none of us ever will. People love to quote theologians, their favorite theologian, to tell you that you're wrong. I mean, theologians are just doing what anyone else is doing. They're taking the scripture and they're theorizing on what they think that it means.
yeah.
They're just doing what anyone else can do, man. People act like that you have to have some sort of level of, what's a good word for it? Education, biblical education, to be able to speak on scripture a certain way. No, that's what they want you to think. They want you to think that so you don't pick up that Bible and read it for yourself and understand what it says.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. Back to, are they all demons? I don't think they're all demons, but big caveat in the big elephant in the room, a lot of them are, especially the ones that are dealing with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they all? No. Some, most? Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I love it. One thing you're going to have to do for me next time you go out on one of these documentaries, just at some point, not to anybody, not to anything, just out loud say, Phil wants to know if there's any Pukwudgies here, just at any moment, and we'll just see what happens,
I want to see one, man. I want a Pukwudgie. I think that would be cute. I think that'd be cool.
That would be ideal. That would be ideal for sure. EVPs of them is one thing, but like capturing one on camera would be a whole other level for sure.
I want to capture one in real life, man, and just strap it to my back.
Go around like old 1800 style. Take the train around, take it around to different towns.
Strap it to my back. And
yeah.
Have it like open up portals for me so I can just like instantly get places.
Ooh,
that'd be
like
awesome.
Dobby from Harry Potter.
Just right? Yeah. I love it. Sign me up.
That's so funny.
That's awesome. So before we get too far away from the documentary itself, why don't you tell everyone when it's coming out and how they can see it?
Yeah, so it's this Sunday. It's going to be at 7 p.m. I should probably know that. 7 p.m. on the 5th. If you go to moment.co/Sasquatch, you can buy tickets now. So you can go ahead and get the pre-tickets. You should be able to also, in addition, purchase the live Q&A afterwards with Wes Germer and Tony. So they'll be answering questions afterwards for, I don't know how long, 30 minutes to an hour. They'll be doing some questionnaire stuff for the people that are involved. But I do think you got to pay like an extra $5 or something. So if you want to talk to them afterwards, you'll set it up. Moment's a great company. They do stuff for a bunch of different indie films and artists that, do streaming live concerts. So they're really good at that. So they're hosting the whole thing. So it'll be really cool. And yeah, so if you just go to moment.co/Sasquatch, you can get tickets now. It'll be this Sunday.
Hell
Awesome.
yeah. And yeah, make sure you guys get your tickets. You're not going to want to miss this. This documentary is absolutely awesome. I just wanted to get this plug in here now, and then we'll plug it again at the end when we're done talking. But I want to get that plug in now. So it's fresh in people's minds because we've been talking about this almost this whole time, minus some alien stuff here or there.
Yeah.
But nothing dangerous, nothing that the Lord Jesus could not defeat.
So I'm about to take it.
Yeah.
I'm about to
Yeah.
take it where I want it to go.
All right,
I have a question I've been wanting to ask you forever.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So, when you and Juan get together and you talk about this homunculi and stuff, so would the meat suit that you've talked about in the past, would that be similar to a homunculus, or is that something completely different? Because I still can't wrap my mind around.
I think that might be considered more of an egregore, but I can say that the homunculi or homunculus could also serve as something like that. Generally speaking, when a homunculus is created, it has functionability without an entity being inside of it. So it's its own entity. It has its own brain functions. It can talk. It can learn, grow, literally grow. I know in the ancient alchemist days, like during the days of Paracelsus and some of those guys, when they would create these homunculi, they would grow into old age and they would become giants. So I know that was the typical way of the homunculus early on, at least what they said of it. So I don't know if it's the same thing as a vessel that's created to house an entity. So it would probably be something a little different than that, because we're talking about something that doesn't have animation and you're giving it an entity to then allow it to be puppeteered. So it'd be like an empty puppet, like a meat sack that's taken over by an entity. So in my opinion, and I'm sure Juan could have maybe a different argument, but I know he and I've talked a lot about it. I know generally speaking, it would be two different things.
Okay, that's cool. Now, because like I said, I'm trying to wrap my mind around this homunculus idea. And I mean, Juan it has so much info, but still I'm like, I get lost sometimes because there's so much, So if you made a clone, would a clone be sort of like a homunculi? But because the way I think of clones is you could clone yourself, but it's not going to be you. It's going to be you in theory, but what is that spirit inside that clone? It's not your spirit. So I don't know. That's a big, deep question. I don't know.
Yeah, like would the Lord allow that?
Yeah.
I can tell you now that a clone would be considered an homunculus. So
okay, cool.
It would be an animated object. So Juan and I have talked about it in depth. So he would consider cloning to be that. Now, here's the tricky part, right? Demonic entities can possess human beings. So that's not to say that a demonic being can't possess an homunculus or possess a clone. So you got to look at that too. So if we're even looking at elite bloodlines and what they like to clone, sometimes they clone to have entities specifically host these bodies as well. So, it's almost like a meat sack in sense too. So it's a complex question that you're asking. There's so many different levels to it.
I know it's going to be complex
and then not. Yeah, it's fun to talk about though. I mean, there's so many different ways you can look at it.
Yeah. And I'm more of a, left brain. Is it left brain, right? The more artsy side of my brain than analytical. So sometimes it's hard for me to wrap my mind around these concepts, but I can imagine what they're like, but the I guess the complexity of it sometimes takes me a while to grasp, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, no, I get it. And it's not there for you to grasp all of it. I can tell you right now, I've done a ton of research and I'm not even close to researched up on the homunculus topic as Juan. I mean, that's his thing. He's literally dug every single cranny and he still hasn't dug them all out. He'll run across stuff all the time. So you'll never grasp all of it. And even if you were to read all of it, you still wouldn't grasp all of it. And even the guys that wrote it didn't grasp all of it. So it's not something I think that you're going to be able to get a super definitive answer on. You're just going to be able to understand, at least in theory, what some of these guys thought about this specific creation.
I got you. So the idea of Bigfoot Dogman being a biological suit for something to inhabit or governmental created, is that like, I don't know. Is that something that I don't you what do you think about that? I mean, you tell me like your take on it, because I can't put it into words, so I'm trying to think here.
So I think that if there are meat sacks created for whatever purpose, and one of my big theories has been that gray aliens, at least as a whole, are meat sacks that are created either by government entities or fallen entities for the spirits of dead Nephilim to inhabit, to then abduct people, take them to another dimension, and extract whatever or mate with them somehow, cause this interaction between them and a fallen entity to create some sort of Nephilim hybrid in this other realm. Then you have to put the possibility there that there are cryptids that are created specifically for certain purposes like this. So I think this is where you're going to see what they call like the white Bigfoot that you'll see all around a lot of military bases. And really only around military bases you see this particular Bigfoot. And you'll see packs of dogmen around certain military facilities. So I think that they have created these meat sacks for these entities to take over, and they use them as basically guard dogs to keep people out of these areas. Because if you're running up on something that the government doesn't want you to be in contact with out in these national parks or wherever else, and you see a giant dog man or a white Bigfoot or something crazy, you're not going to want to go back. And I think that's a good deterrent to keep people away from these facilities. So again, I think if we open our minds up to the possibility that the government can create, probably with the knowledge given to them from these fallen entities on how to do it, but they've created these sacks essentially for demonic hosts to inhabit, and then they, do whatever they're told. So I do think it's a high possibility, and I think this is what you're seeing in these government sectors out in these national parks or wherever else that's remote.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I tend to think, like the interdimensional and the meat sack theory for the Bigfoots or big feet, I guess you could say, and dogmen are like more plausible than unknown species of animal we haven't found yet. Although I don't know if you know this or not. I had a friend that said he had some things happening on his property, and I went over there to check it out, and they were like, he said there was like these large, I guess tree limbs drove in the ground where he was riding his ATVs. And I found a very interesting structure with, the typical Bigfoot where, the limbs are like crossed and there's stuff stuck in there, which first time I ever saw one in person, it was not human made. I mean, there's no way. But the interesting thing is that since I went up there, that he hasn't had any more occurrences. Because I went up there with the camera and I was whooping and knocking on trees and stuff. And it's like dead now. It's like, oh, they're looking for me. They know I'm here. I'm gone. I'm out, So it's close to Oak Ridge also where that happened. And, there's that legend of the white Bigfoot, which that's what made me think of that. Yeah.
Well, and packs of dogmen.
Yeah.
In the Oak Ridge area too, that have run people off from the base area. So, and we know most of that base is underground. We don't even know how much of it.
Yeah.
There either. I mean, there's a collider under there too. So,
oh yeah,
a lot going on in that area. that has to do with portals being opened up. Matter of fact, stories of portals being opened up and entities coming through to scientists that were working there.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember.
You know a lot about.
Yeah, I remember the news article when that came out, and then they're like, "No, we're just kidding. It was a joke," you know.
Yeah, it's just a joke.
Yeah,
as they do.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole area though, there around there, because you know you have Oak Ridge on the one side, and then on the other side, a few miles away, you have Norris, which you know is rumored to have like ancient artifacts, Egyptian artifacts under the water there, which is wild. You know, the whole area is weird.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, it's definitely a weird area. Just Tennessee in general, and especially when you get in Smoky Mountains, there's a lot going on there. I mean, there's a lot of people that think there are pyramids that are considered mountains in those areas. And if you look at it from aerial views, they look like pyramids. They don't look like regular mountains. So I think there are pyramids all over the world, and a lot of them are covered up. And I think that's from a pre-existing time before Adam. I think this was pre-Adamite times where these things were created. So, you know, you got pyramids that have been around for probably millions of years, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, like ancient.
Yeah. And it's weird that, you know, these national parks, I mean, what did they find to make them, you know, they made them into national parks, these certain areas to keep people out, you know?
Right.
Just like the Grand Canyon, the pyramids in Grand Canyon, you know? It'd be interesting.
Well, not only that, and, you know, in the Grand Canyon, you know, they found caverns there where there were all of these Egyptian artifacts that looked like they were from Ramses the First, but it was from a pre-existing time before him, and they attributed it to some Egyptian culture that had been there ages ago when there was never supposed to be any Egyptian people here in North America. Mm-hmm. So again, it goes back to what about history's been covered up? You know, really you start finding a lot of truth when you talk to a lot of Native Americans, because the Smithsonian came out, you know, 100 years ago, whenever it was, and stated that, you know, Native Americans were the first people here, which is funny when you talk to actual Native Americans who understand their culture and their lore, they'll even tell you that's not true. Yeah. Well, we were here, but there were also giants here, tribes of giants, and other people, which I do think that the Moors were also here, mm-hmm. which puts predated Black people in North America around the same time. And this is long before they said Black people were supposed to be here. So it's a very controversial topic, but there's a lot of information out there for people to look into. So I think there were a lot of different people, cultures here for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. And there's also been Paleo Hebrew found on rocks and stuff around this area, especially in like the Smoky Mountains and area. I know that there's a legend that the Cherokee people are descendants of like a lost tribe of Israel, which is very interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting. Also,
stories like that all over across America.
Yeah, there's a Canaanite altar that was found in Chicago and was turned into a water fountain. It's still there, as a matter of fact, and nobody knew it was a Canaanite altar. We're talking about the Canaanites. We're talking about right around where the Hebrews are at. Right in the Middle East. So there were a lot of different. Let's just say that people were moving all over the world a lot sooner than than history wants us to believe. I mean, even with King Solomon, there were items found from King Solomon in South America where he was digging for gold and bringing it back to his temple. So those items were found. So again, it's very interesting. There's a lot of info out there about it. I do think that we don't know a lot about history outside of maybe 150 years. The best we can get to the truth is to talk to cultures that have been here for a long time, that are very open to anything outside of the mainstream, which you'll find a lot of Native Americans are. And and that's fascinating. That was one of the best parts about the Shape of Shadows trip, was connecting with the Native Americans in the area and talking to them about what was going on there and their history. And you'll be surprised, man, when you respect someone, when you come into their space, how open they're going to be, because they know that you're also seeking the truth and you're willing to listen to what they're saying. And I'm willing to listen to anybody. I may walk away and not agree with something, but I'm going to listen to you and probably take something away, if not a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Love it. I love it. I do have a random question. Now it's probably like a really big question, and you might not have an answer for it. But I was just kind of thinking about this, because I was thinking about Nephilim and, half human, half Nephilim kind of offspring and stuff. Now, because you've talked about good Nephilim a little bit in other places and stuff like that. Now, do you think that there's a possibility that some of these half human, half Nephilim could have a redemption as far as believing in Jesus as their Lord and Savior?
Absolutely. And I think there's biblical precedent for it too. So, and I've done some very extensive breakdowns on this topic. And there is even precedent that David's own mighty men had Nephilim on his own personal special ops army. And you can attribute that to where some of these guys were actually from. And you can say, okay, he's from this area. And when you do the deep dive on where that area was and who lived in that area, it was just giant tribes. There were just giants in that area. So you can tell that these specific people were more than likely some sort of hybrid. And this isn't just my theory too. There are some guys that have done many years longer research than me who will attribute to this as well. Gary Wayne being one of them. So it was, I always joke with Tony, because Tony asked him straight up on his show, and this was after I had done the Good Nephilim episode. And Gary's like, absolutely. I mean, there's even stories of dogmen having redemption, the cynocephalus, which St. Christopher, which you'll see in the paintings, he has a dog head. The story of St. Christopher is fascinating. He was a mercenary dogman who came in contact with Jesus while Jesus was on this earth. He literally became a Christian. He became a patron saint. They talk about him. And I know people want to say that it was metaphorical, the paintings they were drawing of this guy, but why is he the only saint with a dog head that's shown in multiple pictures? So that has been said, even by other scholars have run across these dogman tribes called the cynocephalus, and they were very smart. They had cultures. They had a way of life. So they had the ability they just weren't deranged like you would consider a werewolf or a lichen, which I do think those exist too, or have existed, and even maybe now. So I think that it's highly plausible, and without me going into too much detail, but one of the things I can talk about it biblically is in 2 Peter, it talks about that Noah was told to preach while he was on this earth. Well, what we know about Noah is Noah was told with his family of 8 to go to the ark because his gene pool was perfect. So that was the reason. He was perfect in his generation, as it says in the Bible. That didn't mean he was perfect in his holiness. His genes were perfect because that was where the bloodline of Christ would come from, because it wasn't tainted. Well, if that's the case, then everyone else was tainted around him. So why was he told to preach the 120 years that they say that it took for him to build the ark? He was offering redemption, offering a path to redemption to God. And I do think that there were some that took this path of redemption even after the flood, when the giants show back up. I think it's highly possible. And if you want to get into what people consider the Rh negative blood type, which people have, 15% of the people in the world have, they attribute that to a pretty direct Nephilim bloodline. You're saying those people can't have redemption? What about you, Phil? What about you, Jason? You might have Nephilim blood and you don't know. You don't know what's been all mixed up
Mhm.
behind you in the family tree. What, none of us have redemption? That's why Jesus came, because he came to save the Jews and the Gentiles. That was the point, because he came to save everyone. Matter of fact, we could talk about the Great Commission, where Jesus says, what? Go and preach the gospel to what? Every creature.
Every creature.
So, and when you translate it in the Greek, it means creation. It means everything. So he's telling you specifically to do that. And again, I could spend 3 hours on all the nuances about how that good Nephilim is a high possibility, even in extracurricular text. Book of Enoch, Book of Giants talk about it specifically. Mahaway and Gilgamesh have dreams of the deluge coming, of the flood coming. They start freaking out. They go to Enoch. And this is in the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is the Book of Giants. This is attributed with the Book of Enoch. You go by the Book of Enoch right now, you're going to see the Book of Giants in there with it, because it is a specific tale of the giants and what was going on with them specifically during this time. But they go get Enoch because he's the holiest man. Enoch goes to God. He comes back, gives them 2 tablets. One of the tablets is specifically for them. The other tablet is for their fathers, the fallen entities. They decide to read both of them. Enoch says to them to repent and pray, that if they repent, they will be given redemption. It does even talk about that some of them do. It caused what they call the giant wars, which happened before the flood. So there's so many different stories, and even biblically, because I've got a lot of verses that attribute to this as a high possibility of these hybrids, these Nephilim who did turn. Now, the question is, how does it work? I don't know. I mean, they're not all human, but they're not all fallen entity either. You know what I mean? So we don't know how that works, but I believe that the offer is given, because I think God's a very gracious and loving God, far beyond what any of us would ever be. So I think that if I look at God that way, I have to give it the possibility, man. There's no way I'm not going to, but I have a lot of scriptural stuff to back it up. So the guys that like to throw the missiles or whatever have a hard time when I start breaking down the scriptural aspect of it and say, you can't say it's not a possibility. There's no way you can't. So yes, Phil, to answer your question, I think that it is possible, and I think it has been done.
I love it. I love it. That's why I know you've done a lot of research and stuff on this. That's why I wanted to ask that question, because I know I'd get that kind of answer. So thank you for the answer. I think it's really important, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't even know about. So I think it's important to get out there and have discussion and talk about it. Because I think it's interesting. I was recently talking about on another podcast about when Jesus, after he dies on the cross, he goes down to hell, and my pastor was talking about this too. This very thing. He takes the keys of hell and death and life and all that stuff. And the early church thought that because there's a mention of him like preaching the gospel or something to the people down there. And the early church always thought that just meant, Adam and Eve, because back in those, how Sheol used to work. I don't even know if it still works or how Sheol even works now, because it's Lord Jesus has died on the cross. Like, I don't know how that all works anymore, but how it used to work is there'd be 2 different sides, the good side and the bad side. And a lot of the early church thought that Jesus just went to the good side and freed them so that they wouldn't have to be there anymore. But I was thinking that Jesus probably went there not only to do that, but also to preach to the other side too, while he was there, to be like, hey, I'm offering you redemption, to all these people that died previously to this point. And if that's the way it seems to me, because that seems like what Jesus would do. Do you know what I mean? But
absolutely,
it's just something I've just recently thought about. Yeah.
I've done some deep dives on that, and it's part of my Good Nephilim spiel that I go through. And it's funny enough, my pastor talked about that probably about 3 weeks ago, where he talked about that Jesus went. He's like, I'm not here to shock you guys, but he also went down there to preach to people that weren't great. He gave them the opportunity, just like he does anyone else. And in that moment, is he giving, Nephilim an opportunity too? I know people like to say that Nephilim, when they die, they don't have a place to go. And I do tend to believe that because of their makeup, because the book of Enoch does talk about that, right? The Nephilim, when they die, their soul has no place to go and they become these demonic entities. But what happens before they die and they decide to repent? Oh, they're like, people start shorting out, right? And they're like, there's no way. They don't have a soul. Like, what does that mean? What does a soul mean? A soul means only what the biblical Bible says to us. That has nothing to do with anything else. We don't even know how other entities outside of us work when it comes to being able to interact with God in a whole nother universe or a whole nother dimension. We don't know how any of that works. We don't know how redemption works for stuff that's not even in our world. So that's something that people don't think about when they think about this type of stuff. People are very small-minded, and the reason why is because we have small minds and we try to fix things in our little compact brains that work for us, right? And I don't want to get on this tangent really bad right now, but I want to use it as an example. But like flat earth is a good example. So some people believe flat earth, some people believe in a round earth, some people believe in whatever. They believe it's like some etheric matrix, whatever, right? Everybody has their little thing that they believe when it comes to this truth of community, right? What I find funny, I guess, about flat earth is, not to say that I don't give it some of it credence. That's a whole other topic about ice walls and stuff like that. I got a whole different idea on what I think the earth is. I do think it's round, but I don't think it's what they tell us it is either. That's a whole nother topic as it is. I think the ice wall is very possible in this round earth, but let's just say flat earth, right? The funny thing is, the argument a lot of times is, you think we're in a spinning ball and it's spinning out of control and it's all these molecules and whatever. And it's like, do you understand that it can operate in a way that you can't understand because you're not a God that created it? So yes, your finite pea brain of a mind isn't going to be able to understand how all that works, how a universe works. To me, right? And I'm just saying it like this. To me, the possibility of a universe that works in tandem, where solar systems have to move at a certain way, at a certain click, and everything has to move it away or everything's disrupted, is more of an example of there being a God than a flat plane that's in a dome that's very easy for our finite minds to understand, right? And I've seen all the scripture. I've done the flat earth rabbit hole a million times over. And people that say I don't believe in it are like, you didn't dig deep enough. And it's like, well, that's what you say every time that somebody doesn't think like you. I've heard it a million times, man. I've had guys send me literal, we're talking, I had one guy for like 2 months. He would send me a book in an email about what I needed to read, the verses I need to read, whatever. He had no idea that I'd already done all that. And I couldn't read all of what he was sending me either. Just pre-notice, anybody that sends me long, crazy emails, I'm really not reading it. I'm probably going to read about a little paragraph and I'm done. I don't have time for that. But I do a lot of research. And in my research, I don't think it's flat. Now, I don't think that it's what they
I think we lost your audio. Or at least,
like, I can believe that there's a solar system and the Earth's round and still not believe in evolution and believe that God created it all. So those things are inherently tied together. I think sometimes that's what irritates me about the FE cult. I'm not saying everybody that believes the Earth's flat is part of that cult either. I've met some great people. So people that are willing to have the discussion, give you their reasons and their research and all that. great people. I have no problem with that. But I would say 80% of that crowd is part of a cult, because if you don't think like them, then they will shun you and then say you're an idiot. And that's not necessarily the case, because I could do the exact same research as you, just like I could read the Bible and you could read the same chapter and we both get something completely different from that chapter than each other. It works the same way on research. It's not all inherently tied together, right? So
Yeah.
I just think that that's the problem. It's like the alien question from earlier. It's a complicated question. I can't tell you it's all demons. That's a simple answer. Like, it's just like the earth. I can't tell you exactly how it operates. I don't think it's flat, but I also don't think it's what they're telling us either. I can believe that NASA lies, but also believe the earth's not flat. Those two things aren't inherently tied together. I think that that's the problem with this, I ain't even saying this community of quote unquote truthers. They can't seem to get out of their own way. Everybody's got their own real truth. And if you don't believe their truth, then you're wrong and you're brainwashed. Oh, yeah, the government's got you. And it's like, man, the government's got us all, man. You're playing on your iPhone or your Android. They're data harvesting from you right now while you talk. Like, that's the funny thing about it is people compartmentalize their own truths and what works for them. And that's fine. That's how we are as human beings, right? But when we start stepping outside of that and we actually start using our minds and expanding them to understanding that, you know what, I don't understand all of this, but it's not a simple answer either. Like, I brought up flat earth as an example because that's one of those things that people go to as a simple answer. It's simple, it's flat, it doesn't move, it's a dome. The sun and the moon are like this. That's simple. Man, that seems like if I was a god, that's a pretty simple thing to create. But if I'm a all being, all knowing, person that none of us can understand even a fraction of, I just think it would be more expounding of my power if I was to create a universe that worked in a way that you couldn't understand, that you don't really know how it operates. And I think that's more in line with what it is. People think that if you believe in a universe, you don't believe that we're the center of everything. I don't know if we are. Oh, Christians get worked up about that one. It's like, yeah, we're the center of what God created us to know. We don't know anything outside of this dimension either. There's probably millions of dimensions. We know that for a fact. We know that from CERN. We know that they're trying to tap into those dimensions. And I tell you, flat earthers will say that. Well, I'm like, okay, well, if you believe that, then you got to give the credence. Maybe the earth's not flat and stationary. And then, but see, I'm open to the fact that if I was to discover tomorrow that it was flat and stationary, it wouldn't change how I'm moving and how I'm growing and how I'm evolving my mind. It wouldn't change that. I'm still going to be the same person. I still believe NASA lies. I still believe a lot of this BS they're throwing at us is BS. None of that changes that fact. That one thing isn't inherently, your golden ticket to the truth. Again, I just use that as an example because it's one of those ones where I just like, guys, like, expand your mind a little bit. Like, to think that maybe you don't know everything. And that's just one topic. There's plenty of other ones. Mandela effect's another one. People are super cultish over the Mandela effect. There's a lot of people out there that use the Mandela effect as a way to disprove the Bible, because they'll say the Mandela effect changed verses in the Bible, which I don't believe. So at the end of the day, and I've done some deep research on the Mandela effect in the Bible and how, these verses they say changed actually never changed. It was just a change in translation. You can go back to the original Hebrew and those things never change. But there's been a ton of different translations that have happened that have morphed into something different over the years. Mandela,
which you got to be careful about, because I was just reading a scripture the other day and I'm like, I don't remember this being this way. And then I look back in the King James or whatever, and I'm like, oh, it's the wording that's getting me. And I'm like, that's, and it's just,
one of my favorite versions of the Bible is the Berean Standard, and it's a fairly newer one over the past 10 years, but it is very spot on to what the Koine Greek in the New Testament and the Hebrew was in the Old Testament, because they took all these scholars globally, sat down together, and they put this together so it would be as close as possible. You'll find like some of this stuff is different than even the King James. And also, I'm about to say something a little more heretical. Like, King James was not a great person. King
No.
James had a harem of men, and there was tons of love letters that you can pull up right now that he wrote to them that were outside of his arranged marriage that he was in. He also was very key in trying to disrupt some scriptures that were against anything he thought would be against his reign, because Jesus, and especially in the New Testament, some of these disciples would talk about how that God is the only kingdom, that his reign is over anybody on earth. So you'll see some disparities there too. Just saying, I'm not saying that God doesn't overrule even he'll say he'll even turn the king's heart his way, because that's what God will do to make sure his will is dominated. So I'm not saying like don't read the King James. I'm just saying you have to be leery of anything when you're looking at it. What I like to do, I like to take scripture and then I like to go back to the Hebrew. I've got a bunch of Hebrew dictionaries. I've got Greek dictionaries. I go and look at what these words actually meant in these descriptions when I'm breaking a scripture down, and then I can tear it apart. That's when I start finding a lot of really crazy stuff about Nephilim, crazy stuff about giants. When I'm digging in there, like, oh, what is this word? Oh, there's no word for it. Well, they just put sword there. It was a piece of technology. They didn't know what it was. So the guys, when they were translating it to Latin, the Vulgate, they just put sword or put mace or put armor there because they didn't know what it was. They didn't want to freak anybody out. And it's like, no, it was a piece of technology that would probably be considered futuristic. This Nephilim pulled out on King David in the mountains. You know what I mean? So you got stuff like that pops up all the time. You're like, wait a minute, what is that?
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, this has been an awesome conversation, man. We appreciate you coming on. Jason, do you have any last questions you want to bring up?
I have the most important question of this episode.
Yeah.
Out of the big three anime, Dragon Ball, One Piece, and Naruto, which one is the best?
I mean, out of those three, Dragon Ball.
You think so? Dragon Ball Z, GT, or not GT, Dragon Ball Super.
Z to me, because that was what I grew up on, mainly with Z.
Yeah.
And I just got great memories from Z, Frieza, the Buu saga, that was my jam. Great. Now, if you want to ask me though, what my favorite anime is, it wouldn't be any of those three. My top 5 would be completely different than that. So
yeah. Those are just the big three that most people know, especially in America.
Might be more mainstream, I guess, but you'll find some other ones are pretty mainstream too. I think Attack on Titan would be considered probably pretty mainstream at this point. That would be my top 5 for sure.
Yeah,
I would say Cowboy Bebop will be number 1. Death Note is number 2 for me.
Really?
Absolutely love Death Note. There's not one piece of that I don't like. Even the second season, I loved, because I like how L basically set himself up for, if he was to fail, he had everything in motion to still take Light Yagami down even afterwards. The story is super intricate. It's a fantastic tale of two sides that are equally as intelligent, that are basically trying to take each other out, and it's fantastic.
Man, my son and I, we've been watching anime together, and we went back through, we did Dragon Ball Z all the way through Super, which was great to rewatch it with my son,
Yeah.
We've been through Naruto twice, all the way through. We're doing One Piece right now. Yeah, I love One Piece. But also, man, some of the newer stuff is so good, like Jujutsu Kaisen. Oh my gosh, dude. Love it. I like One Punch Man a lot too, and Mob Psycho, and there's just so many, dude. So many.
If you're going newer though, one of my favorites right now is Dr. Stone. That's probably
dude.
Favorites. Yeah,
so good.
So good. Yeah, that's one of my absolute favorites. Fire Force is another great one on the new stuff.
Yes,
that's another fantastic one. So yeah, I'm a big anime guy, just a big nerd in general.
Oh yeah, me too.
So, yeah.
Me too. Such a big nerd. This is how big of a nerd I am. Let's grab right here in front of me. It's got a little Luffy.
Oh, love it. Love it.
But yeah, man, One Piece, I don't know, because I didn't have any interest in watching it, right? And then my son started watching it by himself, and I got, man, there's just something. Luffy, the character, reminds me of my son so much that I think that's why I like it, because he's just like this happy, carefree, pirate guy. And it just reminds me of my son. So
your son's a pirate?
Yeah, he is.
Okay.
Hey man, tell him to start bringing some of that gold back home.
Oh yeah.
Seriously. Too funny.
But yeah, man, it was great to have you on, dude. I know we have been talking about this for literally years about getting you on here, and it never seems to work out, but finally got you on, so it's great.
Yeah, man, had a blast. Totally come back on again.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, why don't you plug that documentary again, and then plug your socials or anything else you got coming up other than that.
Yeah. Documentary is Sasquatch and the Missing Man. Comes out this Sunday, May 5th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go to moment.co/Sasquatch, and you can buy tickets now, and you can purchase tickets for the after party where you can ask Tony Merkel and Wes Germer questions. I just got a new song that came out called Missing. Matter of fact, Jason did the artwork for her. He's been hooking me with some artwork lately, and it's phenomenal. As a matter of fact, Jason, I didn't tell you, I've been getting so many compliments on that artwork for this last one. Everybody's like, "Oh my god, it makes so much sense." The milk carton and your face on it, and it's like Joel Thomas missing.
Yeah, that was your idea. I just put it together.
It was so good, and you did a great job on it. So really appreciate that. That song's out on all platforms right now. You go to Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal. I mean, it's like 30, 40 different ones globally that it's on right now. And that's the official single for the movie. So you'll hear it at the end of the movie too. So check that out. Working on a new album behind the scenes. So that'll come out some point this year. I may have another single come out at some point as well. I've got a ton of secret projects I'm working on behind the scenes at Merkel Media. I've got a really crazy one that I'm putting together. I don't know when it's going to come out yet, but we're working out some of the kinks there. I've got some other documentaries we're working on. I've got a new podcast I can tell people about that's coming out soon called Free the Rabbits. I'll be doing solo. You can just come check me out every week. It'll be under Merkel Media, and I'll be talking about all kind of different topics. It won't really be just one specific thing. I'll definitely be doing some deep dives like I do, but I'll also be talking about a lot of things going on in pop culture and going on in the world too. So it'll be a lot of fun, and I'm excited about that coming out too. Probably looking at somewhere in June when that comes out. But yeah, that's what I got going on. Go check out the film. Like I said, Tony and I got a lot of stuff cooking. Ward's got a lot of stuff cooking. Merkel Media's got a lot on the way.
Awesome. I can't wait, man.
Yeah, absolutely. The documentary was awesome. We can't wait to see what else you guys got coming down the pipe. I'm sure it's going to be absolutely awesome. So please go support Joel, all his projects, his new music, the new documentary, and all that. And we will see you guys next week. Peace.
Next week. Hey guys, get real quick. Whoa. Like, follow, subscribe. Just about to hit the outro. All that, dude. Like, follow, subscribe. Come on.
You heard him. Peace.
Yeah. Peace.